Hey there, it's another beautiful day. I did something pretty stupid that we're not going to go into, which caused today's episode to be a little bit late. So, let's watch some stuff.
One of the other lands in our realm that is heavily restrictive on our travel and exploration. They tell us there's nothing in the North Pole, just ice sheets. But looking back at hundreds of old world maps depicting something much different than we've been told, all showing the same 4 islands with a mysterious black rock mountain in the middle, said to be a magnetic mountain. And not only are they depicting the same land, but they say they were inhabited. Just look at some of the descriptions, even a Tartarian village. The famous cartographer Mercator in 1577 wrote a letter to a friend in England, describing the north as this: in the midst of the 4 countries is a whirlpool, into which there empties these 4 indrawing seas, which divide the north, and the water rushes round and descends into the earth, just as if one were pouring it through a filter funnel. It is 4 degrees wide on every side of the pole, that is to say 8 degrees altogether, except that right under the pole there lies a bare rock in the midst of the sea. And it was far from just one cartographer. Chinese, Japanese, the world over were showing us the same. These cartographers at the time, jobs and reputations depended on their accuracy. They weren't just going to repeat something unverified for centuries. There has been many detailed lands in this realm that have been erased, not just the North Pole, but places like Friesland. But what do you think, signs of a reset or cartographers copying each other? Question everything, friends. Until next time.
There's quite a few theories about hollow earth and the north and the south poles. Like that's just a big old opening or whatever. And that's why we're not allowed to go to Antarctica for whatever reason, because that's how you get into hollow earth. As far as North Pole, I'm pretty sure it's been explored, not 100%. I don't know of any particular like restrictions there, but there's also recently there was a theory that that's where the Garden of Eden is at the North Pole because of that map thing and explanations in the Bible that I don't know about very well. So I'm not going to quote them.
It's an extraordinary story about how governments rule the world. And unless you understand this, you're never going to figure out what's going on. Look at it. When you walk into a courtroom and they call your name, you get up and you put your hand on the gate and you open the gate. The moment you put your hand on the gate, by international law, you of your own volition have opened yourself up to maritime admiralty law, because you were on the law of the land. As long as you don't touch that gate and go through it, you haven't opened the floodgate. Now, once you open the floodgate, there's a piece of wood on top of that gate, and it's called the bar, and you're not licensed to pass the bar. Right. So what you've done is you've opened the floodgate, but you weren't licensed to pass the bar.
So what does that mean?
So that means that you're a dead. You are now, once you touch that, you're a dead.
Because you're no longer in control of
That's right. You're considered to be a dead man. That's why the attorney has to speak for you. He has to represent
why
you.
Are you dead?
Because you went into the deep water and you died. You drowned.
Because you weren't licensed, because you weren't...
Right. You were not licensed to pass the bar. And the bar represents a sandbar in the ocean. But the bar is what the attorneys are licensed to pass, but you're not. So the point being is that when you open that gate of your own volition, you are considered by law to be a man.
Really?
That's why you cannot talk to the judge, because dead people don't talk to judges. So you need an attorney who is your mouthpiece. He speaks for you because you're dead.
How absolutely interesting. I had never even, considered that to be a thing, because that's not what they teach you, right? This maritime law and law of the land and how it can be interpreted and viewed. That's interesting. Hey, thanks Jerry Howard for another fantastic topic. And if there's another topic that anybody else would like me to check out, please let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to get it in an upcoming episode. Now, I know that sound was definitely not authentic, but as far as the picture, I'm pretty sure that wasn't too. Like, I want it to be because, you know me, but hey, I'm really glad you're here today, even though I'm late. I'm sorry. I'm not going to tell you what happened. It just, something happened, and I'm late, and I'm sorry about that. But I am really glad that you're here. Do me a huge favor, if you would, please hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And you can come back tomorrow, because I'm going to make another episode tomorrow. On time, most likely.
All the way up until the year 1865, California was depicted on maps as an island. Scientists tell us that California was in fact an island, but has not been for 120 million years. So why then do maps dating back to the 1500s show it as its own island? They tell us that this was a cartography error and that it was started by the Spanish who mistakenly thought the tip of Vancouver Island and the Gulf of California were the top and bottom of a huge island. But if this were the case, then how did they map such specific topography, such as the islands in the California Channel? And these maps also depict a massive lake in the southwest. The only thing this could be is the now dried up lake of Salt Lake City. Some say these maps were based off older source maps that date back to the end of the last ice age, similar to the Perry-Reese map. But many people also theorize that California was in fact an island, much later in the timeline than previously thought, and some kind of massive earthquake or cataclysm reset its previous inhabitants and created what we see there today. So why do you think early map makers depicted California as an island? Is it a mistake? Or did they really find a giant island up the west coast of the United States?
So yeah, the Central Valley of California was an inland sea. And maybe when people were mapping it, they got to that point and they're like, oh, well, there's land over there, 100 miles that way, or however many miles it was, when they saw the west coast, and they're like, oh, there must be an island. And this inland sea runs north and south for hundreds and hundreds of miles. So yeah, maybe it was. And maybe it was more recent than we think. So, fine by me.
Moment here, we're making sure that nothing is going to come down in the studio here.
And it is going for quite a bit, everybody. It continues
this is a very strong
to rattle
earthquake.
Pretty strong here.
8:21 here on the air. We're experiencing very strong shaking. Wow. I think we need to get under the desk.
All right, we're going to go to break. We'll be right back after this. Wow.
I showed you that clip so that I can show you this one.
The Tesla earthquake machine was a mechanical oscillator, which is basically a machine that produces vibrations. And by producing these vibrations, the machine could be made to resonate with different structures.
The oscillator machine is based on the principle that every substance, when stimulated, has a resonant frequency. If the frequency is matched and amplified by an outside force, such as the oscillator machine, any material can be literally shaken to pieces. The destruction of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington in 1940 demonstrated this principle. The winds whipping around the bridge hit just the right frequency, causing the steel bridge to sway violently in a rhythmic pattern that finally broke it apart.
To demonstrate the power of resonance, we're going to see what happens to a wine glass as it vibrates to its breaking point. First, I'll start the glass vibrating and use a microphone connected to an oscilloscope to see what frequency the glass vibrates at. I'll then set that frequency on a signal generator, which is going to play it back through an amplifier into a speaker. Because the glass is going to be moving more than 400 times per second, we will be using a strobe light in order to slow down the motion. Now, this is going to be loud, so I have to wear some protection. As the vibrations increase in intensity, the glass will start to move more and more, and eventually it can't take it anymore. So as I turn up the volume, the glass will break. So what we saw was like a mini earthquake, and Tesla's earthquake machine would be able to do this, but on a much larger scale.
So if we take this clip and the clip before the lady freaking out over the teeny tiny earthquake, we kind of put them together. And you think of the naval doomsday map, right? Where they think that, that part of the Central Valley is going to flood again and become an ocean again. And California will become its own island. Again. there's theories that there are people who are trying to make that happen. Why? I don't know. It's a theory, and it's taking this into consideration along with the fact that the Central Valley could very well become flooded once more. And then there's this.
Yo, this is a bigger deal than people think, and I'm about to tell y'all why. This rare sea serpent just washed up on shore in California not less than 24 hours ago. And it's known as the doomsday fish, and I'm about to tell y'all how it got its name and why this is a big ass deal. But first of all, this fish resides in depths of 200 to 1,000 meters, meaning that it's hella rare for this fish to be seen on shore. And the only reason why this fish will come up shore is either due to sickness or illness, or there's seismic activity going on. And by seismic activity, I mean the tectonic plates shifting and things like that. But back in 2011, the strongest ever earthquake in Japan happened. It was a magnitude of 9. It was about 15,000 casualties, 6,000 injuries, and 2,000 people went missing. And it was just a big catastrophe for East Japan. It's called the Great East Japan Earthquake. But what does this have to do with the doomsday fish? Just a few weeks before that earthquake, this fish washed up on shore, and about 12 of these fish actually washed up on shore. So if 12 of these fish washed up on shore, it's for sure not, it has to do with seismic activity if a group of them wash up like that. That's how it got its name, doomsday fish, right? But it just washed up on California shore, so what does that mean? Actually, 2 days after this doomsday fish washed up, there was a 4.6 earthquake in LA. Magnitude of 4, it's not that big of a deal. But y'all, it gets much deeper than just this earthquake. Scientists said that this earthquake ruptured on a small section of a fault associated with the Puente Hills thrust fault system. And this fault line goes through a large part of LA. And scientists say that this fault actually competes with the San Andreas fault. They said that the earthquake that just happened, the 4.4 magnitude one, is just a little baby earthquake compared to what's coming. As far as there being a direct correlation between the catastrophic event and this fish, it is a myth. But you have to think about the scientific side of it. This fish is so deep in the waters that it only comes up shore if there is seismic activity. For a fish like this, a rare fish like this to wash up on shore, and a 4.4 magnitude earthquake to happen just 2 days later, that's the only thing that's concerning the scientists. Because if a stronger earthquake happens on the Puente Hills thrust, LA will be cooked.
So this damn fish shows up, and then there's an earthquake. Interesting, right? I think it's time to pack my bags and get the heck out of California.
Imagine an entire civilization erased by a catastrophe so massive it buried cities in an instant. This is the theory of the mud flood and the mysterious fall of Tartaria. The story goes that Tartaria was a vast and advanced empire stretching across Eurasia. Its people were masters of architecture and technology, building cities that defied the imagination. But then something happened, something so devastating that it wiped Tartaria off the map. The mud flood theory suggests that a global catastrophic event occurred in the 18th or 19th century, covering entire cities in layers of mud. Buildings were submerged, streets disappeared, and an empire was buried beneath the earth. The evidence? Look around. Ever notice buildings with windows or doors at ground level or even below? Some say these are remnants of structures buried by the mud, hinting at a world that existed before the flood. But why haven't we heard of this before? Some believe the history of Tartaria was deliberately erased, hidden by those in power who wanted to rewrite history. Maps were redrawn, textbooks rewritten, and the true story of Tartaria was buried along with the mud. The mud flood theory challenges everything we think we know about the past. What if the history we've been taught is just the surface layer, hiding a buried truth underneath? The evidence is out there, waiting to be uncovered, if you know where to look.
Every time I think about the Tartarians and the mud flood and why it's hidden history, my brain just goes into just evil government corruption and needing money, and something happened where the government had to take control and hide everything, and I love it. I love it. It's twisted and it's gross and I love it.
The Philadelphia experiment has been a mystery for over 50 years. It revolves around the U.S. Eldridge, a U.S. Navy destroyer that supposedly vanished during an experiment in 1943. The story began with astronomer Morris Jessup, who received a letter from Carlos Miguel Allende, a former sailor. Allende claimed that the ship became invisible and teleported after being surrounded by a green fog. Allegedly, crew members died or suffered severe injuries during the experiments. The government allegedly discontinued the project after the tragic events. The U.S. Eldridge was later transferred to the Greek Navy and decommissioned in 1992.
Supposedly, like when the Eldridge reappeared, there was crew like fused to the hull and walls, and just it was a gnarly scene. That's the story.
How did this man travel 800 years into the future? In 1943, an experiment called the Philadelphia Project was conducted in the attempt to use Einstein's unified field theory to make the USS Eldridge invisible. However, things went wrong, and the warship started phasing in and out of time. A survivor, Albalek, and his brother Duncan jumped overboard for safety. When they awoke, they found themselves being treated in a hospital for radiation burns in the year 2137, where he reported that a climate catastrophe had already altered the world, and in the wake of World War III, the U.S. is no more. Subsequently, he was pulled further into the future to the year 2749, where he lived for 2 years, reporting yet again that there was peace on Earth, as everyone lived in mobile floating cities, controlled by a super AI robot. He was then pulled back to his original timeline, where he eventually worked on the Montauk Project. But even though the government has disavowed him, the question we should be asking is,
do you believe it? Do you like time travel? I like time travel. I like time travel. I like aliens. I like the mud flood. I like previously advanced civilizations. I like all kinds of weird crap.
Hey, everybody. Here I am in Sherwood, Connecticut, on Sherwood Island. There's a little woodchuck hole. Shirley Troubadour asked a question about why Gates and China are being allowed to buy up all the farmland in our country. And I'm going to tell you something that I had an experience with. I spent many years, about 20 years, suing the factory farms, the big hog farms, and the big chicken producers like Tyson and Bo Pilgrim and Frank Perdue. But Smithfield Foods was the biggest pork producer. And Smithfield came into the state of North Carolina. They built a slaughterhouse that could process 30,000 pigs a day. And then they had a partner named Wendell Murphy, who was in the state Senate, and he passed 28 laws in the North Carolina State Senate making it illegal to sue a factory farm. He left and went into partnership with Smithfield, created a way to raise pigs, instead of raising them on farms, to raise them in warehouses called Murphy 1100s. And they dropped the price of pork from 60 cents a pound to 2 cents a pound. It put out of business all 28,000 independent hog farmers in the state of North Carolina, and it replaced them with 2,200 factories, all of them either owned by Smithfield or contracted to Smithfield. The only farmers who could stay in business were farmers who signed that contract with Smithfield to mortgage their homes, to put those big hog sheds, the Murphy 1100s, on their property, and then they lose all control. They become serfs on their own land. Smithfield dictates all their farming practices. It gives them the food. It delivers the piglets, picks up the grown animals, and brings them to slaughter. They put out of business 28,000 farmers. And they control now 80% of the hog production in North Carolina. Because they dropped the price in North Carolina, Iowa had to adopt the same system, had to cave into Smithfield. They ended up taking control of 80% of the hog production in our country. Then they sold themselves to China. So now China owns all that hog production in America, and it controls our landscapes. And that's the end of Thomas Jefferson's vision of an American democracy rooted in tens of thousands of independent freeholds, each one owned by family farmers, each with a stake in our system of government. And that's why all of this industrial agriculture not only gives us substandard food, but they're also taking control of our landscapes, and that is a huge threat to American democracy. I hope you guys have a good day.
That makes me sad. It just makes me sad, because Paradigm Shift Now over on Rumble, constantly talking about win-lose situations. And this feels exactly like one of those win-lose situations. Too many people had to lose for the winning. And then they just sold it to frickin' China. So there's some more losing. It's unfortunate. There should be win-win situations where everybody can still have survival. You know, they can have everything that they've worked for. But in order for this huge company to win, they have to win the best. Be bigger, get more, make more people lose. And it's awful. And it's sad. It makes me sad. And since I'm sad, I'm going to go now. Thanks so much for sharing your time with me. Come on back tomorrow. We're going to be on time tomorrow. We're going to watch some new stuff. I'll say different things. It's going to be fantastic. Until then, have a wonderful day and try to be happier. Even though the pigs thing is sad. Take care.